Welcome to another episode of Preferred Walk-On. I'm your host, Max Chalik, alongside my co-host, Dalton Wasserman. And Dalton, last week we talked about this week 3 in college football, and we're like, not many great games on the slate, but here's the games that we're looking forward to. And as we said before, the weeks in college football where you think not really a great slate, it turns into madness. And man, we had some madness this past weekend.
Oh, you knew it was coming. You knew it was coming. Anytime they go, it's not a great slate. This is a week 1. Take Saturday off from watching. These are the weeks that scare coaches the most. We said it last week. It was bound to be a circus one way or the other. Only 2 ranked teams lost, but that was enough. And you had a bunch of other ones that got scares. These are the weeks, especially you're talking for a lot of teams, it was the first week of conference play that really they put a scare into coaches. They put a scare into teams, and it's what makes college football great every single week, no matter what the projections say.
Absolutely, man. So you mentioned those 2 ranked teams that lost. So by the way, this is our review episode. We're going over our biggest takeaways from the week of college football. So we're going to go over those 2 ranked teams that lost. And then also later on, stay tuned because we're very excited about doing a panic meter segment because there were 4 really good teams playing 4 really not so good teams, and they all struggled with those teams. So we're going to go through a panic meter for those 4 teams and say how worried we are after that game. But first one that we want to talk about, Dalton, is this Florida-Tennessee game. Florida beating the number 11 ranked Volunteers 29-16. And I want to shout out Billy Napier, Dalton, because he clearly watched Preferred Walk-On last week, and he ran the ball all game against the Volunteers, and like we said, it worked.
Yeah, it sure did. We talked about it last week. Florida won a game. They won the game exactly how they want to win every week. Run the ball, don't turn it over, time of possession, and just get ahead and stay ahead. And ETN had over 170 yards, forced 9 missed tackles. Florida held the ball for 37 and a half minutes, which anytime you hold the ball that long, you have to win. Getting up early, 26-7. They made the one big play on defense with the interception off of the hit on Milton. If there was a blueprint for how Florida would want to win every single week, it's that Tennessee game right there. They were excellent. They limited big plays on defense, and that's the thing. They ran the ball. The other thing I'm going to point out too is they expanded the offense a little bit. Their first 2 games, they only ran motion on 59% roughly of their plays. And in this game, they were all the way up to 83. They really stressed out Tennessee's run defense, honestly, in ways that I didn't think they would. I thought they would kind of line up and play bully ball and run right at them. And they threw a lot of wrinkles in their offense, and Tennessee fell for the window dressing.
Absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned Trevor Etienne. Montrell Johnson Jr. really didn't get that much run in this game. It was the Etienne show from the jump. He had 172 rushing yards, 7.5 yards per carry, too, for Trevor Etienne. You kind of went into it. We were talking about this before. You never really liked Florida that much. I was in kind of the camp where I was like, that Utah loss to me was more about coaching than anything else. Florida has some stupid mistakes and just frankly got out-coached in that game. They still have some talent on this team. So I'm a little I still think this is a quality team. I don't think they should be ranked as they are right now in the AP poll because we're going to get into another team pretty soon that I do have ranked that beat the other ranked team. But yeah, man, listen, it sounds weird coming from a PFF podcast, an analytics-based podcast where PFF as a whole company, if you say run the ball, you might get fired from PFF, honestly. And honestly, this is the game plan. This is the blueprint for Florida, and we were kind of bashing them for throwing the ball 70% of the time. Now they got back to their identity, I think, and now this is the identity they should stick with for the rest of the season. But quickly, Dalton, going to the other side of the ball, the Volunteers, man, this offense really struggled, only putting up 16 points in the loss. What did you make of Tennessee's performance in this game?
Going back and watching it, I think their offense, it's hard. I think coaches love being simple, right? Mm-hmm. And when you have a ton of talent and you're just better, like last year we talked about when they had Hooker and Hyatt and Tillman, they could be simple and just dominate teams on talent. They don't have that level of talent this year. Right now, you watch them and it kind of looks like they have 3 plays in the playbook. You either run inside with right, you throw a screen to the outside, or Joe Milton's going to throw the ball as far as he can. Now, he hit 3 big balls, but, right now, everything else outside of those 3 balls, they were right at 100 yards rushing. They run a ton of screens, and Florida did a good job in the screen game. And Milton didn't complete enough passes outside of those 2 things. Outside of screens, he went only 13 of 26. You're just not it's going to be hard to win games when you only complete half of your conventional passes. And, he had the three deep balls, but it's hard to complete those consistently. 3 for 9 on the deep ball, 3 big time throws for sure. But to go only 13 of 26 on non-screens, they just don't have enough chain moving in their offense, especially if they're only going to run the ball for 100 yards total on the night. They're going to really struggle. They need to find a way to move the chains without it being Milton throwing the ball over the top.
Absolutely. You mentioned that it's kind of like the really boomer bust offense. Seriously, like if Milton's not finding the deep ball, they're not going to get much going offensively. Now, I did think he played okay in this game. He had an 83 passing grade, 3 big time throws, no turnover really plays. But as you mentioned, like it really was those 3 great throws that are boosting his grade, because otherwise, besides the screen passes, like you said, he completed 50% of his passes. For me, I think the 12th man for Florida played a huge role in this game. That stadium was rocking all night. Tennessee had 5 false starts on the night, 10 penalties total for 79 yards. The offensive line did not help out Joe Milton, had a 32% pressure rate in the game. And also, I'm not trying to make excuses and say, Tennessee, that Florida really didn't win this game, but Tennessee also had a couple really bad unlucky plays, I should say. On 4th and 1, Tennessee was going quickly. They had Florida on their heels, and all of a sudden the referee kicks the ball. They have to reset. Florida gets substitutions in, and they make the stop on a 4th and 1. Later on, the referees called a blindside block call on Tennessee that really should have been called either. That took away a major first down and killed a drive for Tennessee. So yeah, man, it really is. And then also the Tennessee jumped on 4th and 1 when Florida was clearly on their own 35-yard line, clearly looking for an offside. They were going to call timeout and punt the ball, and Tennessee still jumped on that. So yeah, the defense not really helping out, I would say, that the offense too much in this game. And I think I'm not fully selling the Volunteers just yet, I should say.
You have a team that they couldn't afford to fall behind, right? The first drive for the Gators took right around half the quarter, if not 8 minutes. You have a team that fell behind on the road against a team you do not want to fall behind against. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Gators, we talked about it last week, the game script is so big. If they score first, if they get ahead, especially ahead, and Milton's interception was unlucky. He was hit as he threw, protection broke down. He got hit as he threw. The ball was basically punted. At 12-7 with the ball, you feel fine. But when they get an interception like that, and the place is going nuts, and all of a sudden it's 19-7. You fall by, this Gator team, I don't think they're the best team in the country. I don't think they're better than Georgia, anything like that. But if you fall behind them, you're in a dangerous spot because they're going to sit back, especially against a team like Tennessee. They're going to prevent as many deep balls as they can, big shots. They're going to make you work for it. And they're just going to run until the clock runs out. And when Etienne especially gets in a groove, I'll tell you, he's not quite as versatile as his older brother. Mm-hmm. But as a classic runner, kind of a more classic back, he's just as good between the tackles, if not better.
Speaking of that Joe Milton interception, I actually tweeted this out, and it was a bad decision by Milton, a bad throw, whatever. But also I want to point out that Desmond Watson was basically spearing him on that play. 435-pound Desmond Watson. Milton still threw that ball 40 yards downfield, even while he was getting tackled by nearly a 450-pound man. So that arm strength, man, is no joke. But yeah, the Volunteers, not a great game in this one. The other ranked team that went down, Dalton, on Saturday was number 15 Kansas State, losing on a 61-yard field goal, tying the SEC record, actually no, longest kick in the SEC history by Harrison Mevis, who I think is one of the best kickers in the country as well. Missouri taking down Kansas State in this one, 30-27. What were your biggest takeaways from this massive noon game, Dalton?
Well, you mentioned Mevis first, and I will say this. If you didn't know him before, you know him now, and he's in the books forever. I mean, props to him. A kick like that, especially when it was, I think it was raining, or at least drizzling at the time, the last few minutes of that game when he made that kick. Just an incredible kick, an incredible game. Yeah. Really, very well played on both sides. But the biggest thing, Missouri with no turnovers. This is what they look like if they don't turn the ball over. Brady Cook, it was his first game of his career with 3 big-time throws and no turnover-worthy plays. He was spectacular. Luther Burden, we talked about it during the game, actually. He's an absolute stud. Deep ball, screens, after the catch. They have built this offense around him. He's an absolute stud, but I have to give them credit. And Missouri didn't run the ball great in this game. They had certainly, I think it was about 100 yards also, maybe 90 something. I can't remember the exact number, but it wasn't probably as high as they wanted it to be. Mm-hmm. but they only gave up 140 on the ground this year instead of 235. So they didn't get blown away in the run game. But the biggest thing is they went from, they had 4 turnovers in this game last year to none this year. And Cook had a deep passing grade of 89.8. He was making big plays when they needed him. And him and Burden really are a combination that if they don't turn the ball over, that's a force to be reckoned with now.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the rushing. Yeah, Missouri only had 74 yards on the ground, averaging 2.5 yards per carry.
Man,
like that is, yeah, that's usually you see that. It's like Kansas State is probably going to beat him down because, like I said, Brady Cook, man, we were low on him. We were saying this guy, I just don't know if Brady Cook can do it, and he proved us wrong, man. Like you said, 3 big time throws, no turnover worthy plays. Luther Burden, this was his come out game. I think he had a great year last year. He had a great start to this season as well. Now everyone knows who this guy is now. If you're looking for who the favorite to be for wide receiver 1 in the 2025 NFL draft, because keep in mind he's only a true sophomore, it's this guy. Luther Burden III is right now the favorite to be wide receiver 1 next year, man. 7 catches, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns. 90 of those 114 yards came after the catch. I think this guy has some Deebo Samuel-like ability, man.
Actually, I was watching the tape earlier, and I was trying to think of a name. I'm like, he reminds me of somebody. Who is it? And it took me, and it just came to me right now. I don't know that he'll be as good, but the skill set, does it look like Devontae Smith a little bit?
A little bit, man. It does a little bit.
That was the name. He's not as thick as Deebo. He's a little more wiry, but he's got just that. He's just got that wiry quickness that for some reason you can't touch. The name just came to my head now after about 2 hours of thinking about it. I don't know if he'll be that good because Devontae's a freak of nature even now. The skill set reminds me a little of Devontae Smith. Get him the ball any which way you can. You got him RPOs sliding across the field, screens, deep balls, slants, and then after the catch, man, he's only a sophomore, I believe. He's it. He is one of the best receivers in the country right now. They have built this offense. Look, if you told me last week, hey, Missouri's only going to run for 74 yards in this game, I would have told you they would lose by at least 17.
Yeah.
And him and Cook, especially what Burden did with the 4 explosive plays in the passing game by himself. I mean, just turn the game around. You can't cover him and you can't tackle him. He's a problem. He is priority number 1 when you play Missouri as a defensive coordinator.
Absolutely. He was the number 3 overall recruit coming out of high school, too, the number 1 receiver coming out of high school, and he's proving why right now, man. I mean, he is an absolute superstar. And like I said, there's a lot of great receivers in college football right now, but I think the guy who could be the best receiver in college football maybe next year is Luther Burden. He's even one of the best right now, man. He's got the second highest receiving grade in the country right now at 89.9. But yeah, man, listen, I said before in our preview, Eli Drinkwitz, you need a signature win. You need it because you haven't done well in your 4 years at Missouri. They got it now. Now they got it now. Now this Missouri team, I have them ranked number 25 in my ranking. They're 3-0 to start the year right now. This is a big-time win for Eli Drinkwitz. They had the fans storming the field. You have the great kick, obviously one of the best moments probably in Missouri football history. And what I think people forget about that kick was that Missouri took a stupid delay of game right before that kick. So it went from a 56-yarder to a 61-yarder, and Mevis said, man, it just makes it look all that better for him, man. And Eli, even after the game, said he did that on purpose to make it more dramatic. Obviously.
Oh, and that kick, I'll tell you too. That kick didn't just clear the crossbar. That would have been good from 65 or 66. Yep. He drilled that ball. I mean, in a little bit of rain with that much pressure after the delay of game, thinking about 56 is hard enough, like you said. To kick a 61, and I mean, I'll tell you, this year, NFL and college, I've never seen so many like 58, 60-plus yard kicks made. These kickers now it's a whole different animal. I mean, and if they're going to start doing it in college, that ball would have been, I bet it would have been good from 66 the way he kicked it. He absolutely drilled that ball.
Absolutely. So Luther Burden III, you heard it here first, wide receiver 1 in next year's draft. Mevis might be kicker 1 in this year's draft, man, because he was great last year too, and he was great this year. Dalton, do you have any takeaways from Kansas State's performance in this one, though?
Not a ton. They didn't play a horrible game. They had 1 turnover early on. They ran the one thing they didn't run with the success they did last year. I think the big thing is they're having trouble replacing what Deuce Vaughn gave them in the running game, like in an explosive sense. I think Ward was their leading rusher with 40. He had 42 yards as their leading rusher. They're doing it by committee, and the totals aren't bad, and Howard can move and all that. So Will Howard played a really good game. I'm pretty sure his passing grade was in the mid to high 80s. There was nothing wrong with Will Howard in this game. They just sometimes you just come out on the road in these games like this on the short end of it, just one play short. But I think they're struggling to find big plays in the running game. Yeah. You know, again, Treshaun Ward being their leading rusher with 42 yards, despite a group effort that's solid at about 135 yards. There's a level of explosiveness missing. Obviously, you lose a guy like Vaughn. They need a little more. You know, it's good to get 4 or 5 yards every time you run it, but sometimes you need a little element of like, he could pop off a 20 or a 30 or a 40. That's the only thing I see missing. But they didn't play a horrible game. No, they didn't. I mean, it was a really clean game played on both sides, a really good game, for it to come down to a moment like that, I mean, I think you tip your hat to Missouri. K-State, I mean, it's not a conference game. They still have every chance to win the Big 12 with a loss like they did last year, and make a New Year's Six game. I don't think any of us expected them to make the playoff anyway. But I think they still have every chance to win the Big 12, and they just they came out really one play short on Saturday. Yeah.
Normally, a really good Kansas State offensive line was not great against Missouri, man. 35% pressure rate the Tigers got on Will Howard in that game. And also, you mentioned they're missing Deuce Vaughn, obviously, with the run game not that great. They're missing Felix Uzama as well, man, because that defensive line, we lauded it before. They only had a 15% pressure rate against Missouri. And I do think Missouri's offensive line is one of the better ones in the country, especially Javon Foster, the left tackle there, who's been phenomenal so far this season. But, man, they really couldn't get pressure on Brady Cook in that game, and 7 penalties also on Kansas State for 65 yards. So yeah, man, I think they're missing their 2 stars from a year ago, and Deuce Vaughn and Felix Uzama. I always kind of thought Oklahoma was the second best team in the conference. I think this kind of proved this week that they are, and I was always a little bit lower on Kansas State because after they lost all those players that we mentioned. But yeah, man, it's still not over for Kansas State either. I think this is
K-State is still dangerous. Yeah. They play fundamentally sound football, and anytime you have a team like that, now you're right, you know, Anadike Uzama was the explosive pass rusher. Cook, I only have pressured here, you said 15 that their pass rush got to him. You know, that's terrible. You can't have that. And Vaughn, with the lack of you lose your 2 best players, you have issues replacing them. A lot of teams have that, though. Everybody's got to deal with that. But they play fundamentally sound football. This was not like some awful game they played. Here and there, they need to tweak some things. They need to find a pass rush. They need a little more out of their running game because, you know, Will Howard was great in the drop back game this week, and that's not always the case. You know, he's more dangerous as a play action passer like we talked about last week. But I think when they play Oklahoma and Texas and the big boys in the Big 12, it's still going to be a dogfight. Yeah. They just have to find a little more in those 2 areas, and they're still really dangerous. And again, I don't think, especially in college, you can take away from teams that play really sound football, right? Consistently, Kansas State has a long reputation of that. Some teams have that more than others. K-State they're well coached. The loss hurts. It hurts big time. If they had any thoughts about going undefeated or any of that, they likely wouldn't have anyway. But you know, it hurts, but it's still out of conference, and I think when they do get to play Oklahoma, you know, Oklahoma hasn't really played anybody yet. So they look great, but they haven't played anybody. Was it Tulsa this Saturday? It's going to be K-State's still going to be very interesting in this conference race.
I think this whole conference is interesting. I mean, we're not going to talk about it in our panic meter segment, which we'll get to in 1 second, but Texas, man, they were struggling with Wyoming for much of that game until they pulled away at the very end, man. But, yeah, so I think this conference, like we mentioned this before, top to bottom, this conference I think is the closest of all the Power 5 conferences right now. So I'm really interested in that. But speaking of that panic meter, this is what we're really looking forward to doing right now. So, basically, the point of this segment, so we're going to rate these panic meters 1 to 10. 1 meaning you're not worried at all, like don't take it with a grain of salt. 10 meaning you're sounding every single alarm that there is. And there's 4 games, Dalton, that we're talking about in this one of, you know, really highly ranked teams that did not look good against very inferior opponents as well. So the first one that we're going to talk about, Dalton, is number 1 Georgia. The defending back-to-back national champs were 27-point favorites over South Carolina, and they beat them 24-14, only by 10 points when they were 27-point favorites. What would you give the panic meter on Georgia right now?
For me, the number is 4.
Okay.
And so it's concerning the way their offense looks, and it's a little concerning the lack of pass rush they're getting at times for stretches, right? So the number for me is 4. 3 games this year, they have 4 pass touchdowns. All right, they have 4 big time throws, and they only have 4 sacks on defense. Okay, so when I look at them passing and stopping the pass, look, South Carolina's undermanned. Guys like Jaheim Bell, some of the weapons left. Rattler's really out there trying to carry
Juice
a
Wells
lot,
didn't play most
and they were ahead early.
Yeah.
Say that one more time.
Juice Wells, the wide receiver, was out for most of that game too.
Yeah, so Georgia, they can do the things we know they can do, right? Like they can run, and they stop the run, and that keeps them in games. Their defense is going to keep them in games, but they have to find a way to get more explosive offensively. I mean, Carson Beck was by far their highest graded player in this game, and a big reason for that was they did not allow a pressure in the second half. You're not often going to go entire halves without a single pressure, right? I mean, look, they're only speaking of the number 4, they're only 4th actually right now in overall grading in the SEC. They're only 4th in offensive grading in the SEC. Brock Bowers only has 13 catches in 3 games. That can't happen. He can't average 4 catches a game. They have to find a way to get him open, because they won't be. I'm still the reason it's only a 4, I'm still very confident that they're easily the best team in the SEC East, probably in the entire SEC, tighter than last year for sure. They are not as dominant as they were last year. They're outside of the top 20 in overall grading in the country right now. They don't look the same. That doesn't mean they can't get there. Look, Beck played his best game so far in this game. He was clean. He's much more. He's got less mobility than Stetson Bennett. He's much more of a classic drop back quarterback. They have to find explosive plays in the pass game, and they need to find a consistent pass rush, because for a Georgia defense that we always think so highly of, should be usually the best in the country, they have 4 sacks in 3 games, and you're not getting. Let's say they play LSU again. If you come at Jaden Daniels with no pass rush and he just has any lane he wants, you're going to have problems this time around. So Georgia, I'm not wicked because of their schedule. Look, they get another tune-up now this week against UAB.
Yep.
Then they get Auburn, who doesn't look great. The SEC East is not. I mean, Florida now is probably the second best team, and Georgia does all the things well that Florida really doesn't want them to. But there's an element here where you're in the playoff this year, whether it's USC or Florida State or Ohio State, you're going to get some explosive teams in the playoffs this year. And Georgia, right now, among probably the top 10, they may be the least explosive team offensively in the entire top 10. You look at guys in the top 10, even like Penix, you got Marvin Harrison in Ohio State. There's a ton of teams that can score points in a heartbeat. And I don't know that Georgia can do that right now.
And it's weird, man, because we came into this year saying that receiving core is loaded. I mean, this is the best receiving core that Georgia's had probably in a while, and it's just they're not doing it consistently, man. They're really not. And you mentioned Brock Bowers. He's in my opinion, going into the season, I had him as the second best player in the country. And you could make the argument he is the best player in the country, because I thought the gap between him and the next tight end was bigger than the gap of any other position in college football. They're not giving their best player the ball enough, man. And they got to do it more. And I have Georgia at a 3 right now. I have it as a 3. Remember last year, they only beat Missouri by 4 points, and last year everyone's like, oh, they're not going to do it. They won 15-0. They won the national championship. I don't know if it'll happen this year. I picked Michigan to win it all before the season, but this was a little eye-opening. I'm not sounding the panic alarms at all, but it was a little eye-opening. Georgia was down 14-3 at halftime. Then they scored 21 unanswered in the second half to win the game. And you mentioned it. My biggest takeaway from the season so far, Dalton, has been that pass rush is nowhere near what we've seen from Georgia in the last couple years. I mean, they lose guys like Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Trayvon Walker, Devontae Wyatt, and Jordan Davis. All of those guys were first-round picks off the defensive line in the last 2 years. They got some dudes, don't get me wrong. Michael Williams will probably be one of the top 15 or so, 10 picks next year's draft. But right now, as a team, they have a 64.1 pass rushing grade, which is the 10th worst in the Power 5 so far. And yes, they played South Carolina, but they didn't have a great schedule before that either, man. And they still weren't really impressive. Like I said, only 4 sacks so far. So, yeah that pass rush is concerning.
You mentioned their receivers, too. On the other side. They're only 2 for 13 in contested catch opportunities. They're not winning the battle right now. They're making the plays that Beck is allowing them to make. And I think they have a lot of similar problems as another team we're about to talk about, in that they've just lost so much. They've lost so much, and they're Georgia's, don't get it wrong, they're number one. They're the 2-time defending champs, but they're a young team. Yep. They're a wicked young team. There are not a ton of guys, especially at the skill positions, with a ton of big game experience. This is going to be interesting to watch. Their schedule gives them time to work with to continue to get better, but it's going to be worth watching how they, like, especially 2 weeks when they play Auburn, just how, if it looks like this, or if they can really rebound, and just they're a team that has time to get better, and for their sake they do need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't even want to put the blame on Carson Beck either, man, because I think he's played well so far this season. But yeah, I just think the receiving core hasn't been nearly as good as I thought it would be, and that pass rush, to me, is the most concerning part of this Georgia team. So we're both still below 5. This is not a sound the alarms on Georgia just yet, but I will say this game was a little eye-opening, especially being 27-point favorites and only winning by 10. Next game that we're talking about, Dalton, is the number 3 Florida State Seminoles beating Boston College 31-29, beating them by 2. Florida State entered the game as 25.5-point favorites in this game and won by 2. What is the panic meter that you're setting on the Seminoles right now?
I'm sitting at the number is 5 right now for me. I was saying more recently before this that I thought Florida State might have been one of the 4 best teams in the country, and it's a game like this that makes me start to question it. Now, on the plus side, you have guys on offense that I trust, right? Jordan Travis, Coleman, Wilson, Benson, Toafili, Bell. They're loaded offensively. So they can, even in a game like this, they can put up 31 points and still come away with a win, right? The 5, to me, coincides with they're the 5th lowest graded defense in the ACC right now. Which you throw the film on, especially in this game, their defense, it's concerning. It's getting quickly concerning, because their run defense, especially, they're going into Clemson, and this is not the team you want to go and struggle in run defense with. They're right now, their team run D grade of 65.8 is 105th in the country.
Wow.
And I see 2 things when I watch this BC game. One, in the run and pass game, their linebackers struggle to make plays in space. They struggle to move laterally. So Boston College was going east and west in the run game and then bringing the boot back off it. And they're kind of old school. Like, they're thumpers. They can get downhill against power teams. It'll be interesting to match up this week, as Clemson really likes to run downhill too and challenge those guys in the middle. Their linebackers are kind of old school, though. They don't move great laterally. They don't move great in coverage. But so I went to see, do they struggle when teams run outside? And their linebackers didn't come away as poorly as I thought they would. It's not great. It was somewhere around a 71 run D grade when teams start getting off tackle on them. The surprising thing I found was, we think of Florida State's defense, and the first 2 guys really think of those 2 guys on the edge, right? You've got Verse and you've got is it Turner, right?
I think it is, yeah.
Turner. Their edge players as a group have a run defense grade right now of a 50 even, which is the 4th worst in the country. They're not keeping contain. They're missing tackles. They are having problems on the edges of their run defense. And I think teams are going to expose this more and more. In Boston College, you saw it. They would get outside, they'd run the bootleg off it. And the combination right now of their edge players struggling to keep contain and their linebackers being unable to really run laterally is causing their defense a ton of problems. They are the 5th worst in EPA per rush, which is honestly, it's actually the worst in the Power 5. It's 5th worst in the country. It's worst in the Power 5 in EPA per rush allowed. Their run defense, especially going into a week like this, is wicked concerning because Clemson, Klubnik's not as mobile as Castellanos is for BC, but Clemson is, kind of like Florida, they want to get off running the ball. They want to run the ball. They want to play defense. And Florida State's run defense is really vulnerable right now. They have a lot of issues in their front 7 defending the run.
Dude, the one stat that I thought was most telling and the most concerning stat, I think, from this game, one of these teams, Dalton, in this game, committed a school record 18 penalties for 131 yards, and it wasn't Florida State. It was Boston College. Boston College was incredibly sloppy in this game, and usually when a team that is underdogs by 25.5 points have the sloppiest game in school history, they get blown out of the water.
Yeah.
Boston College was in this game, even with a school record 18 penalties, man. I could not believe it. So this one was an eye-opener. BC and PFF's power rankings that you can find at pff.com, Boston College is the worst Power 5 team in PFF's power rankings. They lost to Northern Illinois in the season opener, which is the 3rd worst team in the country in that same power ranking. Then Boston College beat Holy Cross by 3 points in week 2, which is an FCS school. So this is not a good Boston College team. Like, this isn't a team that you say, oh, maybe we were wrong about Boston College, just keep an eye on them. What they've proven in 2 weeks is nowhere close to what they did this past weekend. And like you mentioned, my biggest question mark for them right now, that defensive front, man. I thought they had dudes on that defensive line. It's been a little sloppy so far. They only had a 15% pressure rate against Boston College. They allowed 4.5 yards per carry. I'm glad you brought up the linebackers too, because in the preseason, I put out my top 10 position unit rankings where I ranked the top 10 position units all across college football. The only position unit that Florida State was not in the top 10 for was linebacker. So that was a weakness, I thought, on that defense, and they got exposed in this game. Now, I should say I had Florida State at 5 as well. I agree with you. 5 is my panic meter. I will say I'm holding out hope on fully panicking on this team because I think there's a chance that they were looking ahead to Clemson in this one. I think there's a chance of that happening, which is why I'm not fully going nuts on them. And they also let BC, it was a lot, Florida State was up by a lot more late in the game, and then Boston College had a really big comeback right at the end. So I'm not fully panicking, but this was more of an eye-opener to me than the Georgia-South Carolina game was, because South Carolina, I think, is a decent team. Boston College, I do not think, is a very good team at all. So this was a pretty concerning one for me in this one. But the next game that we're talking about, Dalton, is this one I think we're going to have some fun talking about, is number 10 Alabama, 34-point favorites, number 10 Alabama. They beat USF 17-3. So winning by 14, even though they were 34-point favorites. Dalton, what are you setting this panic meter on for the Crimson Tide?
All the way up. All the way up. The number's 10. There's 10, and it's a good theme. Look, let's just put this into context real quick. Alabama, who ranked number 10 in the country, okay, went into USF, and if you watch that game, that wasn't a road game. That place was 85. Other than USF student section, the rest of the place was Alabama fans. Okay, wasn't a road game. USF last year is strongly in the argument they may have been the worst team in the country last year.
Yep.
And they certainly had the worst defense in the country last year. I think Colorado graded lower than them, but when you account for level of competition and USF schedule and all that, I would argue USF was the worst defense and maybe the worst team in the country last year. So number 10 Alabama goes to play what last year was the worst team in the country, and in a game with a new head coach in his 3rd game that just beat FAMU by only like 13 or 14. Okay, next you go into this game. There are 2 quarterbacks that played, Buckner and Simpson, only completed 10 passes all day. And I know in the first quarter it was raining. Cool. The weather is in Florida. It's raining 1 minute and sunny, sunny as anything the next. And that's how it was the whole second half. The conditions for especially the second half were not that bad. Only completed 10 passes. And you mentioned the score being 17-3. one of those touchdowns was scored with 30 seconds left when they easily could have just kneeled the ball down. They really only scored 10 points on USF. And USF's defense is grading higher through 3 weeks than it did last year, because they were the second worst defense in the entire FBS last year. It's inexcusable. Yeah. And we were going back and forth about it during the game about why they even benched Milroe when this is what they have otherwise. And now Saban, I don't know if you saw, Saban about an hour ago just announced that Milroe's back in as the starter. That has to happen. Now they have issues all over the board. They are ranked 100th in the country in pass blocking grade, a 55.8. They are barely in the top 100 in pass protection. Simpson took, he had the one big throw that really, turned it in Alabama's favor finally in the second half, but he took 5 sacks in the second half, holding the ball too long. And this is USF. I mean, I can't emphasize enough that right now USF, if they had a competent quarterback, because Byron Brown is currently, I believe, is the lowest graded passer in the country. Mm-hmm. I think his passing grade's under a 30. Like, if USF had a competent quarterback, just competent, they would have won this game. This game was 3-3 for a long time until it was 40. What took more than 40 minutes for Alabama to score a touchdown off the one big throw from Simpson. That's the only good throw either quarterback made all day. But if you're Alabama right now, honestly, considering the situation in the opposition, that it's really disgraceful how they played. It really is. Now, they ran the ball well, mm-hmm. as they should against USF, but they're just, almost a 57% pressure rate against USF up front. I'm getting to the point where it really doesn't matter, for as much as I think Milroe is clearly the best one. If nothing else, I learned this coaching. If you don't think you really have a quarterback that can really let it rip, just play the best athlete. Yeah. And Jalen Milroe walks onto most football fields as the best athlete on the field. Mm-hmm. They didn't get blown out against Texas either. They weren't the better team. Yeah. They lost by 10. Milroe made 4 big-time throws in that game. I mean, now he's risky with the football. We mentioned it last week. He's got a little Anthony Richardson in him. But he's also got the Richardson part of big plays and running the ball and improvising. Look, they're going to have to improvise their way to wins. Mm-hmm. Buckner, that's all we learned in this game was Buckner and Simpson give them no shot. Milroe at least gives them a shot, but I'm full tilt panicked about this. It's a game we're going to preview, but this Ole Miss game is going to be a struggle. And if they just can't score, if they're outside the top 80, if they continue to be outside the top 80 in passing grade, and right around barely in the top 100 of pass protection, this is going nowhere. I am full tilt panicked. I'm at a full 10 for this one.
Dude, I'm at a 9 for this one because I do think the defense is still really good, and that might keep them in enough games. But we might have 2 former Nick Saban assistants beat Nick Saban in a span of 3 weeks, man. And that is an exclusive club to begin with. Steve Sarkisian obviously joined that club a week ago, and Lane Kiffin might do it this week, man. And then Ole Miss. We'll talk about it in the preview coming out later on this week, but we are getting into crisis mode. It is now crisis mode for Alabama's offense. The Bulls entered this game, the USF Bulls, the 11th worst team in the country in PFF power rankings. And my biggest takeaway, and it's something I've said before, last year's Alabama offense was basically Bryce Young, the number 1 overall pick in the draft, the greatest quarterback probably in Alabama history. He put out fires all over the place for last year's offense. This year, those flames, those minute flames that really weren't as big as a lot of people made them out to be, the offensive line was really good last year. The receiving corps was not great, but it was fine. Those flames turned into a full-fledged forest fire in Tuscaloosa this season. And the problem is there are no firefighters in sight right now because you do not have a quarterback that can elevate the offense. You have 3 quarterbacks that need to be elevated by the offense, and you don't have an offense that can elevate a quarterback. Tommy Rees, new offensive coordinator, I have really been disappointed by him so far. They can't get any sort of rhythm on offense. And that offensive line, dude, that's something I want to talk about too. The 4th highest pressure rate in the Power 5 so far surrendered at nearly 30%. And their biggest thing, everyone keeps talking about how massive these guys are. In fact, their offensive line, Dalton, is bigger than any offensive line in the NFL, and everyone's lauding that and saying, oh, this is awesome. It's not that good of a thing, man, because they can't move. They can't get to the second level. And you get to the third and fourth quarter, these guys are gassed, dude. So these offensive linemen, I think, are way too big. I don't know what they were doing feeding these guys that much and making them hit the weight room that much, because these guys are like 370 pounds, man. They can't move.
You're bringing up the right point with that. I'm going to throw you a couple of things.
Yeah.
Is against blitzes. Now, here's the first problem they're going to have going into the SEC. Okay, first of all, the worst, most discouraging part of this game for me, more than the quarterbacks, even more. Okay, we learned who their second and third string quarterbacks are. We learned who their starting quarterback should be. So the rest of the year is actually the one thing we're sure of. I go, just put Milroe in there, and what happens, happens. Again, I'm going to emphasize this, against USF, they were clearly the less physical of the two teams. Yeah. USF mashed them physically, especially up front when Bama had the ball. But you mentioned how big they are. They've had problems with this for a couple of years, but now it's come to a real head. Against blitzes, their pass protection is 101st in the country, and their quarterbacks grades and passing grades are 119th. And against stunts, the pass blocking is 122nd. They're in the bottom 12 against stunts. When you say they're too big and they can't move, that's real. They cannot adjust. There's between mental mistakes and just not being able to adjust blitzes, stunts, pickups, all that stuff. You got teams like USF doing it to them. Mm-hmm. If I'm in SEC defense, especially if I'm already a blitz-heavy team, I'm not sure if Ole Miss is. That's going to be something to preview. That'll be some fun to look at. But the book is out. Yep. Blitz them, stunt them, fool them up front. Even if you're good, even if you beat them by a half a step, they just can't get there. Mm-hmm. They are having such problems when teams play games up front. On top of the fact that then, there were moments in this game where they just got bullied. If you took the rankings out, you took everything out, size, whatever. You look at this game and you just go, USF was far and away the more physical team. And Nick Saban, I remember the interview coming out of the half. I don't think I've ever seen Nick Saban look so defeated. Yeah. He looked defeated, and I think that's usually a spot where he'd go in there and go into the locker room raging hot and angry, and they come out and it's like, now it's like, oh, they're back. Alabama's back. Here comes Mike Tyson and knock you out, right? Mm-hmm. And he looked defeated, and they came out in the second half the same way. Just no physicality, nothing whatsoever. You can't. As poorly as they played on the offensive line, you can't play in the SEC. Like, that's USF. They were the worst team in the country last year. Yeah. It's off. Dude, that offensive line, I was going to bring that up too. You would think that offensive line, when every single player on that offensive line is 360 plus pounds, basically, you'd think they'd be dominant in a phone booth. Like, yes, maybe they can't get out in space too well. Yes, maybe they struggle in pass protection, but at least one-on-one they'll dominate. They didn't dominate in this game either. So I really am perplexed on this offensive line that is extremely talented, by the way. They got 5 stars across the board on this offensive line. An offensive line that I actually thought was pretty good entering the season. Now, man, I am really, really struggling to see how this offensive line is going to hold up against guys like Harold Perkins. If LSU does not rush Harold Perkins every single snap that he's on the field, that is malpractice, man, because he is going to take advantage of these massive Alabama offensive linemen. I would be so worried playing a team like LSU, especially with, they're athletic, right? USF, they're small, but they showed their front to be reasonably athletic. And when you're that big, eventually there comes a point where your feet just don't move like that. And Perkins, we've seen it before. He can line up in any gap over any lineman. And if LSU starts getting, I guarantee you they're going to put new stunts in just for when they play Alabama. They're going to get Perkins going in the stunt game. They're going to, there's a chance it looks like Parsons looked against the Jets yesterday, honestly, because between they can't block him anyway, and then just some of the stunts that were going, a team like LSU, or if Bama were to manage to get to the SEC title game somehow and play Georgia, the stunts and blitzes. The blitz thing was a problem last year, and it just, like you said, Bryce Young put out the fire. He got rid of the ball, or he improvised. They'll have that this time. The only thing you're going to see is Milroe just taking off running and doing the Anthony Richardson thing, but they've been struggling to protect blitzes for a year or two already. Yep. And now it's just come to a head where it's so bad that they're making teams that obviously aren't as good as them. It's keeping them in games. I don't know what the combination of their quarterback play, their lack of a number one receiver, and their pass protection. If you didn't have the Alabama jerseys on them and just the reputation and Saban and all that, if this was just some other team, if we were talking about an Illinois or just some average team, whatever, you'd be like, wow, their passing game's a train wreck. Because it is.
Yeah.
It just is. They just went in there. I don't even care that it's with Buckner and Simpson. They just went in the USF and completed 10 passes. It's just, and the grading supports it. This hasn't, it's not like, in the Texas game, it wasn't great when Texas blitzed them, or we talked about when Texas when they brought a 5-man front, you just have no answer. There's no answer right now up front.
Dude, Buckner completed 36% of his passes in this game against USF. That is
against USF, and they had the ball the whole day. USF couldn't move the ball.
No.
So it's Alabama.
Lucky they played USF.
Every drive was the same.
They're lucky they played USF, and again, USF is a bad team, guys. It's not like a really good American Athletic Conference team, because there are those. This is a bad USF team. So this is why we're sounding the alarms. And you mentioned that receiving corps right now has the 63rd best receiving grade in the country. There is still not a dude in that receiving corps, and you combine that with the offensive line being so far atrocious to start the year, and you have no idea what to do at quarterback. Now Jalen Moreau is starting, which I think you and I both agree is the correct move, because like you said, you just go out with the best athlete. But man, Milroe's a roller coaster. You never know what you're going to get with him. Buckner, in 3 years now, has not proven that he's a starting caliber quarterback or passer. And Simpson, I thought Simpson looked pretty good, and he was a 5-star recruit a couple years ago, so I'm intrigued by him. But he's a virtual unknown, dude. He has 21 dropbacks to his name.
I find it odd. how Saban is handling all this, to basically use USF as a throwaway game for his pseudo QB competition, and those two guys were just awful. The Buckner thing, I think he's just appeasing Tommy Rees for some reason, because he came with him. And now he goes back to Milroe, and I don't know if you heard the comments that he said today. If you watched that, he says basically, Milroe showed leadership on the sideline with the other two guys playing, and through 3 games he's played the best. So I go, you started him the first 2. It wasn't great, but you didn't get blown out against Texas. Texas is just better than them. You bench him for, I guess you just want to have an in-game competition. I would have gone to him. I would have gone to him at halftime.
Yeah,
I wouldn't even gone.
Definitely.
I wouldn't even gone to Simpson. Why make that? Why in a 3-3 game that you're getting, honestly, even though it's tied, you're getting embarrassed in up front? Would you then put in Simpson, who made 1 good throw in an entire half and took 5 sacks? Well, I would have gone to Milroe at halftime and just said, "Hey, man, we just get out there and take this game over." They really won this game 10-3. I don't care what the final says. They scored that touchdown with 30 seconds left.
Yeah,
I would have gone to Milroe at halftime instead of that, just to save the embarrassment. That it was embarrassing, and how he's handling this now. Now they have to play Ole Miss, and Milroe lost reps, took a week off. And
his confidence might be shaken too.
And you have no idea where your offense is.
Yeah, his confidence might be shaken too, man, after getting benched like that. And like you mentioned, their running game was the only positive thing to take away from this offensive performance. When you have Milroe in there, I mean, you could run read option until you drop, basically, and USF would have nothing to do. Couldn't do anything.
I think they need to go about it the way that Tennessee is trying to go about it, right? Because Alabama's, I love Jaden Wright for Tennessee, but they struggled to run the ball the other night. Now there's going to be times where he gets off. We've seen it, right? But I think that's pretty much how they're going to have to go about it. Read option, right? Put in some looks, get him on the move, get him booting, get some RPO game going. And the same thing as Joe Milton with the arm strength. Look, just try to make big plays, because they're not going to consistently pass protect. There will be games where they consistently run the ball well. The USF game, I mean, they did, but it's also USF. You have the biggest line in the country playing USF. You should run the ball for, I think it was 230-something yards. Yeah. McClellan's good. McClellan's really good. He is. They have to slow games down and run the ball, because they can't just drop back and throw it. They just can't. I don't care who their quarterback is. This offensive line, they need to roll. Tommy Rees, he's got to spend. I mean, the problem is, I want to say he needs to spend time putting a whole bunch of new stuff in. He doesn't have time. He wasted his time. You have Ole Miss this week, like Georgia, and the stuff we talked about on their offense. They're playing UAB this week, okay? Then they're playing Auburn. Then I think they're playing Vandy. Now, you don't want to mess around with Auburn. That's a big rivalry. But they have time, right? Before they get to the end of the year, and I think they play Tennessee, Ole Miss, SEC title game, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Alabama does not have time.
No.
All of a sudden, you benched Milroe for a week, and he's back in, and now he has to play Ole Miss, and he has to find a way to outscore Ole Miss.
Yeah.
The entire process right now, I think, has been botched.
Yep.
And if they win Saturday, it'll be because their run game and defense were just spectacular. They forced Dart into turnovers. Because I mean, look, Ole Miss is dangerous, man.
Yeah.
This might finally be the year, because you know how it is with Ole Miss, where they might finally be the best team in the SEC West. They might finally do it. Have they ever? Is there a thing? Have they never won the SEC West? Is that right?
I can't remember if they have before. I mean, it's got to be a long time ago if it has happened.
I could have swore there was a thing I heard where they've never won the SEC West, right? And they've had big wins in the past decade, even against Alabama. But Ole Miss is feeling like this is their shot, and they're going to get a quarterback now on 4 days of prep off of that game. They're going to be watching that USF tape, licking the chops, man. Telling you.
Absolutely. So they won the last time they won the SEC West. They were co-champions in 2003, but they've lost a tiebreaker to LSU. So they really didn't even win that year either. That's the only division championship that they won since 1992 when the SEC split into 2 divisions, man. So yeah, man, this is dangerous now, and I want to emphasize more. So to me, it seems like Alabama is going to try to get back to the Alabama of yesteryear, where you got Derrick Henry and the offensive line just bullying people in the run game. The quarterback situation not great, passing game not great, but man, they're going to run it down your throat. The problem this year, though, you don't have the offensive line to do it, man. You don't have the NFL offensive line, all 5 guys, to be bullying guys right now. And the run game is good, but it's not like you have a Heisman Trophy winner in Mark Ingram or Derrick Henry to rely on just to carry you through games right now. So I'm scared, man. I think the offensive coordinator, Tommy Rees, I'm disappointed in. The quarterback situation is a mess right now. Offensive line is not good. Receiving core, not good. Listen, man, I think Nick Saban is going to miss the playoff for the 2nd straight year, and that hasn't happened, Dalton, since 07-08, which were his first 2 years on the job. That was the last time Nick Saban went consecutive years without making either the college football playoff or BCS national championship game, were his first 2 years as Alabama's head coach. And I think that'll happen this year, man. So we just spent a long time in Alabama, but it really was because this has been a horrible start to the season for Alabama. But the last one, Dalton, that we have to talk about today is our number 18 Colorado Buffaloes beating Colorado State 43-35 in double overtime, even though Colorado was 23-point favorites in this game. What are you setting the panic meter at right now?
Well, is Colorado not the most fun team in college football, right? By far, it's the most fun team to watch. Look, a lot went wrong in this game. I'm going to be honest. 90% of this game, Colorado State played better. Mm-hmm. Colorado State coached better. Colorado State was more physical. Colorado State made bigger plays on 3rd and 4th down. Travis Hunter took the cheap shot and got knocked out, which is just awful. I mean, you so want to see him play these next 2 games, and if he can't,
no, he's out for weeks. They announced it already.
As cheap shot gets, that was pathetic, But that's how that game was. The entire game was like that. Colorado State, I think, another team. It was 18 penalties, same as Boston College, a ton of them. Camara at the very end with the roughing the passer that got him ejected. Yeah. Colorado State lost this game in part for just playing undisciplined football. But they wanted to make it that way. They wanted Colorado out of their comfort zone, and they got him out of it. Hunter got hurt, but I'm going to tell you something. Considering the expectation and all the unknown and everything, the rivalry, everything that happened during the week, the meter for me is still only at a 2. And I'm going to tell you, it's all about number 2, Shedeur. Yep. I'm going to throw some at you. Second overall highest graded quarterback in the country. Second in passing grade in the entire country, behind, I believe, Tyler Van Dyke. Second most yards in the country. Second most first downs. He behind the scenes last week, we talked a lot about Shedeur and we couldn't bring it up on the preview show because we didn't think we'd have to be previewing this game, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you something, and wrote about it after the TCU game. The way he sees the field, unbelievably well. Coverages. I got some more numbers for you in a second here. He sees coverages.
Yep.
He's so cool under pressure. He makes quick decisions. He's got probably a B+-ish arm. Certainly good enough. I wouldn't put it in the Caleb Williams or Joe Milton category for sure, but he's got a solid arm. He's got solid mobility. He takes off when he needs to. The poise, it should go without saying with who his dad is, how high his football IQ is.
Yep.
And anybody taking that for granted right now, I'm going to be honest with you. I think as far as just intelligence and poise and football IQ and reading the field, I don't think anybody in the country does it better. Not even Caleb Williams. Williams is like Mahomes. He's a freak. He's got the arm. He can just do freak things. In Lincoln Riley's offense, it's just the perfect pairing.
Yeah.
Shedeur plays like an NFL quarterback. And we had a conversation. You had asked me at one point last week, off air, is he QB3? Because it's assumed really that Williams and May are the first two, and in next year's draft if he comes out. And then you've got a group of guys. There's Penix, there's Nix, Riley Leonard for some. Shedeur is absolutely in that conversation.
Yeah,
he just is. I had him in that. I had him in that conversation 2 games in after the Nebraska game. He sees the field so well. There is not another college quarterback right now that sees the field as well as he does. The coverages and everything. And this game, look, they were down 11 with 8 minutes left. Was it?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Kick a field goal. Colorado State played an excellent game in the red zone for 90% of it. They were terrific in the red zone on defense. All right. Down 8, 98 yards to go with somewhere around 1:45 left. And he did that. That touchdown throw, I mean, it's ridiculous. That last that touchdown throw to tie the game to Horn. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I was in the top 3 boat last week. That 98-yard drive and then the overtime performance. I don't know if I'm the first one to say this, or I might just get crazy looks. He might actually be QB2.
Wow.
I think even if they lose, if he shows out like that in the next 2 weeks, we're going to start talking about him versus May. There's just nothing he does wrong. I'll throw you a couple. He is only one of 2 quarterbacks in the country with a top 10 passing grade, clean or under pressure, the other one being Penix. Okay? He's the only quarterback in the country with a passing grade in the top 10, whether he's blitzed or not. And he's the only quarterback with passing grades in the top 10 against man or zone coverage. I don't know. I think Nebraska in that game came out with a nice plan. They said, we're going to mess with him. We're going to go 0 blitz, or we're going to go 8-man drop.
Yeah. And
nothing in between. We're just going to give him nothing normal. Okay. TCU, they tried a thing where we're going to go man coverage the whole way, and we're going to make him make big throws, and he did. Nebraska said, we're going to be weird. This game, Colorado State really couldn't come in with like a hard. They played a lot of zone too. They really dropped 7 and rushed 4, and for a lot of this game, Colorado State's D-line won the game. The poise in this game and the ability to just stand in there. The first 2 games I could break down schematically why Shedeur is so good. That 98-yard drive and the overtime, and just look for 90% of this game, probably more actually when you think 6. For 95% of this game, Colorado State was the better team.
Yes. And
he, with Hunter out, and with guys not, I'll tell you what, Colorado State tackled for their life, man. They gave up nothing after the catch. I don't know. I need a number on how many tackles they missed. I'll have to find that, but it wasn't many. What he did took him from a category of, wow, this kid's really good. He's like a really good quarterback, to like a special, like that drive alone. I got flashbacks of Burrow. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
I think if we're about to see in these next 2 games, and for the whole Pac-12 slate, because the Pac-12's rough. It is. It's rough, and they play everybody, right? We're about to. It's very possible that about 3 or 4 weeks from now, it's not a QB3 conversation. It's QB2 conversation.
I love it. I love that, man. Yeah, you mentioned Shedeur, now the second highest graded quarterback in the country behind Tyler Van Dyke right now, man. I mean, It's crazy, man. I will say I have it as a 6 because I'm a little bit I was a little more concerned about it than you. I think we should temper our expectations for Colorado a little bit. There are a lot of people who said, this team could make a playoff push and all that. I don't think so. I think this is a 7-8 win team. I said that after week 1. I feel the same now, where I said, you know what? They got his issues, but like you said, with number 2 back there under center, they can win almost any game, man. They really can, because I think Shedeur is that special. Colorado State, 8th worst FBS team, in our power rankings right now. So I also think this game was close because both teams' emotions were running high all game in this one. Colorado State treated this like their Super Bowl, basically. So I think this game is close a lot because emotions were running high. You saw stupid mistakes on both sides as well. So I really think it was more of that than anything else. But I will say, Colorado's defense, man, the Rams ran crossing routes the entire game, and Torrey Horton torched them. The whole game, it seems like they couldn't figure out that, hey, Colorado State is just going to run this one play every single time, and they couldn't defend it. Torrey Horton in the game had 16 catches for 133 yards and a touchdown. And like you mentioned, the Rams had 17 penalties for 182 yards in this game too. They played sloppy. Shedeur really, man, that might have been his Heisman moment. I think right now I'd give him the Heisman Trophy right through 3 weeks so far. 2 minutes left, 98-yard touchdown drive, and a 2-point conversion to tie the game. I don't think Colorado had any timeouts left either on that drive. I could be wrong.
They might have had one. I think they might have gone into it with one.
Okay,
but
still,
yeah. You mentioned it, and I think I think a thing is, Deion's a corner, and he trusts his corners, and I would need to look at the coverage breakdown of. You mentioned the crossing routes. First of all, at halftime, I'm looking at Colorado, and my first thought was, I'm just like, they need to calm down.
Yeah,
you just need to calm down. There's too much on your back right now. Okay, you're at home. People are buying $500-$600 tickets just to get in the door.
College
You're
game
getting
day.
in fights before they. You just need to calm down. Travis Hunter, that whole thing, all that stuff. They were worried about too much. Okay, and they got to playing bad football. Now I do think I need to look at the breakdown. But Colorado, from just the eye test, plays a lot of man coverage. Those shallows are going to work.
Yeah,
that's how it works. You play a ton of man coverage, it's going to work. I saw the one thing I noticed late in the game. Started getting a little more in like cover 2 and it's the adjustments happened really, really, really late, like almost in overtime, honestly. They went and it just, Colorado State, another one like BC, they're going to argue they lost this game on penalties. The coach was arguing it at halftime, I think, or after the first quarter maybe. But Colorado, look, you're right on tempering expectations. I think there's a world where they win 10 games. Yeah, I do. You have a quarterback like that, and look, their defense isn't great. Yeah. I think on both sides they struggle a bit in the trenches. They struggle to run the ball and they struggle to stop the run. But they have a quarterback and they have weapons. And they have a secondary that forces turnovers. So they're dangerous. They are dangerous to anybody in front of them. Okay. We're going to get into the upcoming matchup Wednesday, so I'm not going to say too much because I know where this is going. But, yeah, Colorado's a flawed team. They're not a playoff team.
No.
They're not. If they make the playoffs, it's probably the single greatest one-year coaching job. We had TCU last year.
Easily.
That's not – first-year coaches don't do this, especially at programs that are train wrecks. Like what Sonny Dykes did last year was unprecedented already. If Deion were to do something like that in Colorado, it would be the greatest story in college football history. Easily. It would. It just would. But you've got a team with an elite, no less than top 5 quarterback in the country right now. He might be the second best one. He really might be. Weapons, Horn, Weaver. I like Dawson. They're working Dawson in some. I would like to see a little more balance in this offense. They're not running well, and they're not stopping the run well. I think they're giving up the 12th most rushing yards per game in the country right now. There are flaws. But to be honest with you, why I'm not panicked at all, and the 2 was a fun theme because Shedeur, I'm not, because we can't have like playoff expectations for them. No. This is the first year of this, and Deion's even admitted himself. He said this either during one of the pressers or to somebody. He goes, "We're like 6 or 7 guys short of that." But he's like, "You got to give me some time here to get on that level. Right now, we're just out here competing with what we have, and there's nothing more you could ask in the first year of a whole new program." Like that, so for me, there's no panic at all. I think even if they lost these next 2 games, what is there to panic about? It's Colorado. They weren't supposed to be doing this, And honestly, I'm willing to bet we'll get more in the previews because we're going to have them each of the next 2 weeks. You already know Colorado, USC's. Put it this way: if Colorado were to go in there and beat Oregon somehow, some way, that game against USC would probably be the highest rated college football game ever.
Yeah.
And who wouldn't want to see it?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, even if they might be the most entertaining 3-2 team we'll ever see, I don't even care. There's no panic. What's the expectation?
Yep.
What was there somebody before the year picking them to win the conference? Like, I don't have a sense of, now should, there's this too. Colorado State played up, man.
Yeah, they did.
They played up. They played a really good football game. Like USF. All right, let's roll back. USF played a great football game on one side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
All right. For the most part, Colorado played a great, outside of penalties, they played a great, or at least 95% of a great football game on both sides. They were up 28-17 with 8 minutes left. Got them where you want them. On the road in the what might be actually the most hostile environment in college football right now. Yeah. Just because of the electricity. I mean, The Rock is standing on the sideline. You've got Michael Irvin standing out there. Everybody and their mother standing on the sideline. I mean, it's Colorado State played up.
Yeah.
Okay. Big time. Big time. I don't know if they'll play another game like that this year, even against Mountain West teams. And if they do, props to them. I mean, really. But this game goes into the category for me of like just weird college football fun.
Yeah.
And I don't think we could ask for any more than that, really. So I'm not panicked. I have nothing to panic. I don't expect them to win the conference anyway. Yeah. I don't. I mean, me with USC sitting there. I mean, I don't know. To me, Washington could beat USC on a good day. Utah did it last year twice. There's teams that could beat USC, but I don't think they're gonna.
Yeah. I would say I only put 6 because I do think that people need to temper their expectations for them. Because I think the expectations, they had game day there at a game that really, you look at last year, they're probably like, oh, man, that's one of the worst games in college football last year. This year had game day. I think people need to temper their expectations. I will say Travis Hunter, one of the reasons why I had 6 too, Travis Hunter, Deion announced today, is out for 3 weeks with that injury, man. Which is that takes him out of Oregon, and that takes him out of USC too, man.
Oh God, that's so awful. I'm like, I don't think they would have beat USC with him, but it's just even just for the entertainment factor. Yeah. He's the best corner in the country.
Yeah, he might be.
Wouldn't you want to see the best corner in the country against Oregon and then against USC and Branch and Singer and all those guys they got out? I mean, on top of the fact that he's a big part of their offense. The kid's a freak. You lose, between him and Sanders, you got 2 freaks on that team who, you lose one of them. Oh man,
that's why I had it at 6 too. Because I wanted.
I'm going to be doing so much thinking. I'm going to be doing so much thinking the next 2 days about this Oregon game because of that alone. I still am not a believer that Oregon should be 14-point favorites if they still are.
Neither why. I will say, as bad as that hit was and as dirty as it was, the one thing I did love about it was that the first guy to go up to, I think Henry Blackburn was the Colorado State player who made the hit. The first guy to go up to Henry Blackburn and get in his face was Shedeur Sanders. Love that dude.
Oh, this guy, Shedeur was getting in their grill just about, from what the head coach, from what Norvell had said about Deion before the game.
He's a leader.
I mean,
he's a leader.
He's a leader, but I'll tell you what, and you see his post games, he's calm and cool as anything though under pressure.
Oh my
man,
God.
Oh man. He belongs in that spotlight, man. I mean, tell me this. How many guys other than him, because we just saw him do it, are capable of that 98-yard drive? How many? In a minute 45. Minute 45 and 1 timeout and 98 yards. How many are even capable of doing that?
Not many. Not many at all. Might only be him.
3. Maybe like 3 guys.
Yeah,
Caleb.
capable. Yeah, Caleb for sure. Yeah, him.
Maybe Jordan Travis.
Maybe. Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know if May could do it with his receivers right now. We talked about his receivers last week. I'm not sure he could do it. I don't know. I just go. He's doing things that other guys aren't capable of.
Yeah.
And when you have a quarterback like that, you have at least some non-zero chance against anybody.
Yeah. I think Penix maybe could do it too with that offense they got there too. But yeah, man, it is a very small club, and that was like he said in the postgame, he's like, I went Brady mode on that drive. He looks at Tom Brady as a mentor. He talks to Brady all the time. That was Tom Brady Brady-esque that drive, man.
Yeah.
That was Brady-esque. So that was phenomenal.
That's as good a drive as you're going to see in college football all year.
I
don't care who's across from Colorado State was playing a terrific game.
Yeah.
They were. I don't care who's across from you. Those were difficult throws. There were several really difficult NFL level throws on that drive.
And if he hoists up the stiff arm trophy, the Heisman Trophy at the end of the year, every Heisman winner has their Heisman moment. That was his Heisman moment. That was Shedeur Sanders' Heisman moment in that game. And we might even see more Heisman moments, man. Because like I said, I would give him the Heisman Trophy. I think you would give him the Heisman Trophy right now through 3 weeks. I mean, it is phenomenal. But I will say, this team is going to be the most electric team every single week because the offense is going to score on anyone and the defense is going to let anyone score on them, basically. So it's going to be interesting seeing them go against Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr. Also, physical teams could expose them too. They play Utah this year. They play Oregon State this year too. Every game, and like we mentioned before, this is a game they were favored by 23 points over a really bad Colorado State team, and they still went to double OT. This team in every single week is pure electricity, and you better be tuned in for every single Colorado game. So again, a really fun Colorado team. They're going to be a roller coaster all year, but man, you better be tuned in for every single week because they are going to be awesome. So that's what we got, though, for our Week 3 review. We know it's kind of a longer episode, but there's a lot to cover. And I'm just teasing it right now. It probably will be a longer episode that you're going to get on Wednesday as well because our preview of Week 4 has 7 games that we have to talk about. Usually we stick to 5. Dalton, there are 7 games on Wednesday that we're going to be talking about, man.
It's and we talked last week about don't look too much into don't try to project the slate, but it's hard not to with this one. I mean, this is the week where college football starts to take shape. This past weekend was a fun one. It was a fun one. You had a lot of teams get scares, and we can kind of watch the tape and figure out who's who. But no, this is the week because there's just too many. There's too many head-to-heads. especially in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Just for A, the playoff, and B, just trying to win the conference. Winning the Pac-12 is going to take some guts this year, man.
It absolutely will. So there are 6 games between ranked teams. I believe 3 of them are between Pac-12 teams. So the Pac-12 will be on full display this weekend. So I cannot wait for it. And also, that's not even including the Clemson-Florida State showdown that we have to preview as well. And, yeah, man, it's a Week 4, one of the greatest weeks not only of this year in college football, of the last few years, I would say, in college football. So you will not want to miss our Week 4 preview that is coming pretty soon this week. So because we're going to be talking a lot about these games. But that's what we got for this Week 3 review. For producer Eli back there, for Dalton Wasserman, I'm Max Chadwick. We'll see you guys on Wednesday.